Hi, everybody, and welcome to this little lecture that I'm going to put together to get everybody started for the little section that we're going to do. We're going to actually do a little bit of acting of classical text. This is in preparation for a chance for us to see a little bit of Shakespeare when we go to London, and hopefully this is going to be designed to just give you a little bit more of appreciation for all of the artistry that really goes into delivering classical text on the professional level. There's the other video on there that's going to go into a little bit more explanation of iambic pentameter, but I'm going to cover a little bit of that as well as some of the other elements of classical text. So let me just get our slideshow going here. Okay, so first of all, I just want to kind of give you an overview of what I'm expecting for the assignment itself. So you're going to start by choosing one of the two speeches that you're going to do, and from that, I want you to start by just figuring out what it is that you're saying. It's perfectly fine to use a guide, anything that's accessible. Just make sure you look up the words and you really figure out line by line by line, what am I really saying? Because even in all of this analysis that we're going to do, the most important thing is to actually still convey the basic meaning of the text, okay? So start by just making sure you know what it is that you're saying. Next, we're going to actually start to analyze the text, and this is when we're going to really get into other elements like the meter, that is the scansion, the iambic pentameter, as well as a lot of other elements here. Now, when you're doing the analysis of just the scansion, I'll go over that a little bit more specifically, just so you can work it right off of the Word document. I just want you to bold the stressed words and then leave the unstressed words or syllables just in regular text. Much easier than doing the slash marks and the sort of the half smiles, which we normally do when we're handwriting an analysis of text in the theater, but that'll allow you just to do everything very easily on a Word document. Okay, so you're going to analyze it, you're going to figure out and make some choices dealing with meter and scansion. The other thing I'm going to want you to ask you to do is, now as you start to understand the text that you're trying to convey, I want you to underline the really important words. These are sometimes referred to as the operative words or the target words in any of the lines. You know, something that you really feel is most important to kind of add a little added emphasis so that we really understand and feel the line that you're trying to say. You're going to also identify what we call caesuras, which are just a little pause. Very slight, not a big stop, but just a very slight pause to add a little bit more meaning. We're going to notify a caesura with 2 slash marks, and then something we call an end stop. That's when you really are going to stop and end the line, like at the very end of a sentence. Obviously, an end stop is going to add that much more emphasis to the line by making sure that it actually comes to a complete stop at the end of the line. That's going to be marked with just an X. And then you're going to have discovered that there's certain lines that don't want a caesura at the end of the line or an end stop, but it's really a continuation of that same line. That's known as a run-on, and you're just going to give a little arrow mark to just let us know that it's continuing. The last thing that we're going to also cover in this little lecture are the poetic and also the rhetorical devices that Shakespeare employs, because I want to make sure that you understand them. And I'm not asking you necessarily to notate those in any specific way, but I want you to be looking for them in the speeches that you've got, but I mostly want you to be familiar with them so that when we go to see the Shakespeare piece, you can get a chance to actually hear and identify some of those poetic and rhetorical structures that are going to be adherent in the play. All right, so the first thing that we're going to look for is just some basic scansion, right? This is what's going to also be in the video. It's going to be, this is a speech that's been broken down into very distinct iambic pentameter. That is to say, there's going to be 10 syllables in a line, and it's going to mirror that heartbeat that is described in the video. Bum, 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 bum. That's a perfect 10-syllable iambic line. 5 feet of 2 syllables each, making 10 syllables. So let's just read the speech right now if we were to do it in a perfect iambic line, that sort of heartbeat sort of feel to it. Now, you'll notice when we do this, it's not going to necessarily work perfectly, but we're going to see that this speech can be done totally in regular iambic pentameter. To house holds both alike in dignity, in fair Verona where we lay our scene. From ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. From forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, whose misadventured piteous overthrows doth with their death bury their pair in strife. The fearful passage of their death-marked love, and the continuance of their parents' rage, which but their children's end not could remove, is now to ours traffic of our stage, the which of you with patient ears attend, wait here shall miss, our toll shall strive to mend. Now, I didn't do this at all for meaning. I just wanted to kind of go through it so that you could get a sense to see exactly what a regular iambic sounds like. You notice that some lines it works perfectly well, other lines not so much. You also notice that there's certain places where we've contracted syllables so that they actually come out as a sort of a single syllable as opposed to two syllables. And some things we might even add a little bit. So there's a little bit of variation in there. But you can see how I've got the bold on that second syllable all the time. Sometimes that syllable is a full word. Sometimes it's just a syllable of a word. All right. So now let's take a look at the speech more analyzed, where we're going to see what happens if we really bring a little bit more of the meaning. And you'll see where some lines, maybe half of the line is irregular, the other half of the line is very regular. And you'll also notice that I've added the little arrow marks for the run-ons, the X's for a full stop, and the double slashes for a little bit more of a caesura. So I'm not going to stop entirely, but I don't want to necessarily plow directly into the next line like I would a run-on. All right, and let's just see how this sounds. Two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona where we lay our scene, from ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. From forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, whose misadventured piteous overthrows doth with their death bury their parents' strife. The fearful passage of their death-marked love, and the continuance of their parents' rage, which but their children's end not could remove, is now to ours traffic of our stage. The which of you with patient ears attend, what here shall miss, our toll shall strive to mend. So here we've added more sense, but I've also paid very close attention to the way that I analyze the speech so that the important words kind of come out the way they're supposed to come out, and also certain words that just don't really make a whole lot of sense if the stress is in the wrong place. So a little bit of common sense, but a little bit of artistry too. And there's many, many different ways one might analyze the speech. But one thing that you notice is that sometimes when there's irregular lines, then when we go into the iambic has a real sort of urgency and rhythm to it. So by changing the rhythm, you sort of add more emphasis when it becomes very rhythmic. And this is partly of what Shakespeare is really out to do. And when he becomes irregular, he's sending clues to the actors of sort of an emotional quality that he wants that's different from when he has the line very, very regular. Now, you'll notice in Shakespeare's earliest plays, they tend to be far more regular than irregular. Romeo and Juliet's relatively early on. But you can get into the later plays, like The Tempest, for instance, where he still uses a fair amount of verse text. He starts to get much, much more irregular and is much more selective of when he's going to go with a really, really regular iambic pentamic line. All right, so I'm just going to add a couple of other terms that are sort of related to scansion, and just to give you a little bit of a sense of what's going on in the poetry that Shakespeare is really infusing into this text. For instance, when he's really using a short line, that is to say it's less than 10 syllables, there sometimes is a more gravity in that strong emotion. Sometimes if the line is short, maybe it's only 4 syllables, the actor is going to make a decision on whether to make that long that long just lasts longer, so it lasts 10 beats, or maybe just do the 4 beats as it would be in whatever rhythm is set up, and then simply don't speak. That's like a huge end stop. So where the actor actually will pause for maybe well, if it's a 4-beat line, we'll be pausing for 6 beats before moving on into the next line of text. So Shakespeare is infusing, he's giving some sort of stage direction there, and a very intuitive actor and director are going to pick up on these clues that Shakespeare has embedded into the text. Now, if it's a very long line, sometimes more than 10 syllables, sometimes there's a sense of urgency, or being rushed, or being flighty, or flabbergasted, or any number of the emotions that might come from really being rushed along as you try to cram those maybe 11, 12, maybe even 13 syllables into a metric line that's intended for only 10. We already talked about the caesuras, just sort of that natural pause in the phrasing. And you can see a couple of places where you can tend to sometimes find them. In most cases after a second or third syllable. I don't know. These are just some things that are maybe little clues, but I don't put too much stock in them. The end stop, as we talked about, is where we really want to make sure that we bring things to an end, and that's usually going to be obviously where there's a period at the end of the statement. And we also talked about the run-on, where there's really a sense that the line just keeps going, and we really don't want to add any pause to it. Once again, we want to be identifying those operative or targeted words, the ones that make the most sense. These are going to normally be verbs, but not always. So when we sometimes refer to a line that has a stressed end, which is how a normal iambic line ends, that we can refer to that as a male ending. Iambic pentameter works in such a way that the end line always has an extra power to it. That's one of the reasons why the poetry works particularly well for dramatic work. And then the female ending is thought of as going to be an ending that is an unstressed last syllable. We talked a little bit about elision. That is to say, sometimes we're going to actually sort of contract 2 words or 2 syllables into a single syllable in order to make it work well within the iambic line. So we sometimes will make a decision on whether to contract or not contract, depending on how we interpret the line and how much irregularity or irregularity we want to do with that particular line. The last thing that I do want to sort of bring up, oops, I think that might be in the, oh right, so it's on the bottom of the sheet. When we have a word that ends with an ed, usually the editors of text are going to make this decision for us. They will take the e out if they don't want it pronounced. They'll keep the e in if they want ed pronounced at the end of the line. So here we've got Romeo is banished, as opposed to Romeo is banished. If the editor thought, you know what, this really needs to be just a 2-syllable word, they would take that e out and probably put just a little hyphen d, so it would be banished as opposed to banished. But if you see ed, normally speaking, you're supposed to pronounce it as ed. All right. So now we're going to take a look at some of the poetic and rhetorical devices found in Shakespeare's verse. We'll also find a lot of this in the prose as well, but because we're looking at the most poetic of his structures, the verse text, we're going to take a look and see at a couple of things to be on the lookout for. Alliteration is something that Shakespeare uses a lot. Alliteration is using consonants normally to start words and using a number of them in order to sort of, again, give sort of an added dramatic essence to the text. So here we'll notice the P's, the S's, and the M's in the speech. This is from Henry V. And tell the pleasant prince, this mock of his hath tuned his balls to gunstones, and his soul shall stand sore charged for the wasteful vengeance that shall fly with them. Off many 1,000 widows shall this his mock out their dear husbands, mock mothers, from their sons mock castles down, from some are yet ungotten and unborn, that shall have cause to curse the dolphin's scorn. Now he threw a couple of vowels in that alliteration as well. But if you kind of look at sort of like cause, curse, scorn, you get a sense of just the taunting nature of this particular speech. It's meant as mocking. It's meant to torment. And the alliteration adds to that sort of feel. Now, the next little speech is from Midsummer Night's Dream. You'll notice that we have all of these H's. This is Helena speaking after Dmitri just left her in the woods. For ere Demetrius looked on Hermia's eyne, he hailed down oaths that he was only mine. But when this hail some heat from Hermia felt, so he dissolves and showers of oaths did melt. Just starting to do those H's, you almost start to hyperventilate a little bit. I mean, she's on the verge of tears. She's also pouting a little bit. And here again, Shakespeare is using those first letters to sort of instruct the actor a little bit about where he senses the emotional qualities of this particular speech. So as you're going through the speeches that you're working on, but also in the play that we're going to see, let's be on the lookout for uses of alliteration. Antithesis is a really crucial element for just understanding what the heck some of these lines are about. Basically, all antithesis is when we're setting one word against the other, and here's some great examples from Romeo and Juliet. So let's just take a look at the first line. Yet tell me not for having heard it all. So you'll notice that tell, to speak, is set off against heard, not, as in nothing, is set against all. Yet tell me not for having heard it all. So we want to bring out those words in order to understand how they play against each other. Here's much to do with hate and more with love, right? So much goes against more, hate against love. Why then, oh brawling love, oh loving hate. Again, double antithesis, brawling going against, well, actually, in this way, they kind of work either way. Brawling to love, loving to hate. We can also look at them as brawling, loving, love, hate, either way. Of anything, of nothing, first create. Anything against nothing, that's a single antithesis. Oh, heavy lightness, serious vanity. So here we've got heavy against lightness, serious against vanity. That's definitely the way that particular antithesis works, right? We see 1, 2, and 2. So antithesis is a device, a poetic device that Shakespeare uses a great deal. And if the actor can bring the antithesis out, it helps us in the audience not only grab the meaning, but also sort of appreciate the poetic structure that exists in the text. Shakespeare is a great fan of puns, although sometimes they're not always funny, as I've noticed. This is one of the most famous lines from Romeo and Juliet. Ask for me tomorrow and you'll find me a grave man. That's after Tybalt has managed to get himself stabbed in the duel with Romeo. And then finally, actually, no, I'm sorry, that's Mercutio who has gotten stabbed by Tybalt. Glad I made that correction. And then, you know, sometimes he has multiple puns off a single word. A word that's used a lot in Shakespeare is the word will, which can be William, as in William Shakespeare, determination, sexual appetite, or in Elizabethan times, the sexual organ. So puns are used a great deal, sometimes very purposely to be funny, and sometimes purposely to contrast, using humor to contrast the depth of the situation. Ladders are another poetic device that again kind of instructs the actor how to address the speech. The idea of a ladder is that you have a line and there's something in the sense of it that tops it in the next line and tops it and tops and tops it until it kind of reaches a peak. Sometimes that peak is the end of the ladder. Sometimes you get to the top of the ladder and actually the last line sort of undercuts the whole thing. Let's look at this little speech from As You Like It. This is Rosalind. Oh, I know, sorry, let me start that again. Oh, I know where you are. Nay, 'tis true. There was never anything so sudden, but the fight of 2 rams, and Caesar's tyrannical brag of, I came, saw, and overcame. For your brother and my sister no sooner met, but they looked, no sooner looked, but they loved, no sooner loved, but they sighed, no sooner sighed, but they asked one another the reason, no sooner knew the reason, but they sought the remedy, and in these degrees they have made a pair of stairs to marriage, which they will climb incontinent, or else be incontinent before marriage. They are in the very wrath of love, and they will together clubs cannot part them. Now, this actually isn't iambic. This is actually a prose line. But ultimately, even in this speech, you can really get a sense of that sort of stepstone of the ladder. Let's just take a look at it again. So it really starts with no sooner met, but they looked. No sooner looked that they loved, no sooner loved but they sighed, no sooner sighed but they asked the other the reason, no sooner knew the reason but they sought the remedy. So up, 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 up. That time I kind of went down a little bit for sought the remedy, which is the end of that ladder structure. You also notice that incontinent is used ultimately in a pun manner in this particular scene. All right. One other thing that's sort of interesting about Shakespeare, something that you don't have to worry about so much in this assignment, but I wanted to just sort of bring it to your attention, is that Shakespeare often embeds stage directions into the dialogue itself. Because this is because in Shakespeare's day, they didn't really have directors. It really was just the producer, and the producer usually just was an actor who also often took the main role in the production. One of the people that actually was putting money into the production, along with those other people, but there really was no director. So if the playwright really had things he wanted to have happen, he really had to put it ultimately into the text itself. So here we see, like, if I profane with my unworthiest hand, he kind of is going to be showing his hand there. This holy shrine, there's a sense that he's taking her hand for that. The gentle fine is this: my lips to blushing pilgrims ready stand to smooth the rough touch. We've got a little bit of antithesis here with a tender kiss. He offers the kiss. You can read through the rest of this, but you can get a chance to see how the scene, based upon what the characters are actually saying, is really telling the actor or the director exactly what should be happening stage direction wise within the scene. Okay, and let's see. Oh, just one other thing to be on the lookout, particularly in the comedies, is the use of rhymes. Although it's not restricted to the comedies. Here, just as that same speech, you'll notice that we've got sort of an AB CD structure, as like alternates until the end. So we've got hand to stand, this to kiss, much to touch, this to kiss. And then to do, prayer, despair, and then at the very end, what we call the rhyming couplet. That is to say, two lines that both have their last words that rhyme together. This particular structure is very, very effective. The director and the actor will make the decision of how much they want to bring that rhyme out. Every director is a little bit different in sort of what their sensibilities are. And so just be on the lookout for when we go to see our production that we're going to see, what kind of use of rhymes are used, and whether or not the director has made the decision whether or not to make them really, really prominent or not. Okay, so that's pretty much all I've got to say. Just make sure that you do watch the video if you haven't watched it. It's really enjoyable, but it really talks about iambic pentameter in a very fun and insightful way. So remember, you're going to submit the text with your analysis of the text and meter, as well as I want you to make sure that you have circled all of the important words, the target words. The big thing is when you record is and make sure that you are making sense of it. At the same time, I really want to hear you try to do the iambic lines as you've done this. So basically do the stresses exactly as you've done it, but try to get that meaning across. The purpose of this ultimately, again, is to have an appreciation just by going through this exercise. When we get to see when we get to see professional actors taking on the Shakespearean text, it's going to be that much more enjoyable, I think, when you have a sense of how much artistry really goes in to doing a good job delivering classical texts. So last thing that I got to say is just enjoy yourself, have fun with this, and we'll see you. I'll be looking forward to receiving everybody's recorded speeches. That's it for now. Thank you so much. Have a good time with this.